We are Gold Ivy, a health company dedicated to simplifying health and wellness. Tune in as we search to find the deep, real, and raw truth. We're here to talk big, no room for small talk. It is our mission to inspire, seek growth, simplify the action steps, and build confidence.
You decide what works for your daily life and how to transform our lessons into your gold. Are you ready to step into your power? Now is the time. Join us on the fearless pursuit of self-discovery and growth.
This is Ivy Unleashed,
a Gold Ivy production.
If you're a regular listener of the show, or you follow us on social media, you know I, Brooke, just ran my first marathon, and Andrea ran her 22nd state in her goal to run a marathon in every state. How did I go from barely getting out of bed to being able to run 26.2 miles? A customized training plan and coaching with Andrea. With my health concerns, it was important for me to make sure I crossed that finish line safely and confidently.
We are so excited to announce that we are now offering customized training plans. Whether you're wanting to run a 5K, 10K, half, or full marathon, we've got you covered. Get your customized training plan plus coaching to get you race ready and keep you motivated along the way. Prior to receiving your training plan, you will meet with me, Andrea, for a 15-minute call to discuss your goals, race details, and schedule your 3 coaching calls. You will receive a training plan for your race, tailored to your schedule, endurance, and cross-training preferences like yoga, biking, strength, or whatever movement you enjoy.
Coaching throughout your training will provide accountability, safety, and inspiration to keep you pursuing your training and race goals. With Andrea, you will connect your mind and body to maximize your race experience. And if you're looking for a custom training plan without coaching, we're offering that as well. Head over to the shop page on our website, goldivyhealthco.com, to learn more and get you across that finish line.
Something that has made a world of difference for us and many people we know over this past year has been getting our groceries delivered right to our door. The ability to get local, fresh groceries without us having to step foot into a grocery store has been something we are so grateful for. Convenience, price, and quality are extremely important to us, and that's why we love and support Instacart. Instacart can deliver to your front door in as little as 1 hour. You can shop multiple stores, see deals in your area to help you save money, and every item is hand-selected by shoppers based on your preferences. To start your 14-day free trial and to get free delivery on your first order over $35, follow the link in the show notes to let Instacart know that we sent you and to help support the show. Instacart, never step foot in a grocery store ever again. And now to today's episode of Ivy Unleashed.
Welcome back to Ivy Unleashed, everyone. When Andrea and I started Ivy Unleashed, our hope was to not only make health and wellness information accessible, but also to share inspiring stories of people who have persevered through hardship. We are so honored that Kailey, our guest today, was ready to share her story of strength, resilience, and self-respect, and chose Ivy Unleashed to be her vessel. Kailey, thank you for being here with us today, and welcome to Ivy Unleashed.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited.
Yes, and I just want to echo what Brooke said. It feels surreal to have someone approach you to say, I'm ready to share my story. And so we're just super grateful, Kailey. And we're really proud that you're here because you're representing that when something feels wrong, it's wrong. And we talk a lot about listening to yourself, listening to that voice inside of you. And there's a lot that you had to go through to be able to hear your own voice. And so can you take us back to your childhood, your adolescence, before you were an adult and out on your own?
Yes, absolutely. So just to kind of give a general idea, at least to the listeners, I was born and raised in a religious cult, sect, whatever you want to call it, but it was not good. It was not right. And I did not realize that because there's so much brainwashing and indoctrinating that they do. Like literally, as soon as you're a baby, you are put in the baby class, and then you put in like the first grade class, and just like they're on and throughout your whole life. And at each stage of your childhood, there are like different depths that they try to, brainwash, indoctrinate. So basically, if you're born into it, you don't know anything different. And I always wonder, like, if I was homeschooled, if I didn't go to a public school, if I didn't get to see that, not everybody was like this, then I don't know where I would be today. A lot of my childhood was spent not only anxious, feeling guilty, shame, but also like I was basically trying to recruit my friends because I was taught that they were all gonna go to hell if they weren't going where I was going to church. It's very much a one true church kind of thing. So if you don't practice every single thing that they practice, then you're not doing it right. And one wrong thing can basically just send you like straight to hell. And so there's basically just like a lot of just worry, a lot of guilt, a lot of shame. And I always just kind of thought that was normal. I didn't realize really that, it's okay for me to not have to go to a service 3 times a week without feeling like I don't have to feel guilty if I miss something. Like I had to miss like so many sporting events. I had to miss so many things with my friends. I was constantly berated for like wanting to miss, because it's like, well, this should be your priority. Are you idolizing your friends over God? Are you idolizing this sport over God? It's very much all or nothing. And that's like their whole thing is like, if you do one thing wrong and you don't ask for forgiveness and you die, then you're going to hell. So a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. Basically, I working on this with my therapist a lot. It's just trying to remember that I don't have to apologize for everything. I don't have to constantly be worried about like righting any wrongs, or if I rub somebody the wrong way and like maybe they think a little poorly of me, like it's not always my responsibility, or it's not ever my responsibility to fix what other people think of me. And that was just so deeply instilled in me as a kid and all the way into young adulthood, just that I was the one to blame for everything. I mean, my sisters, my family, my friends, like everybody is just like always to blame. And it's kind of hard to put into words, but that's kind of a general outline of that, is just, yes, lots of shame.
Thank you for explaining that. I'm sure it's really hard to put your entire lifetime in childhood and adolescence into words. And I'm sure there's so many examples of things that you could go through to talk about how you ended up realizing this was abuse. And so what we really feel is important is to hear more about how you figured out, because this is your world. This is, your parents are in this church, your family's in this church. How did you get to the realization something's off here? Life could be a little bit different, or I might be being abused in some way.
In high school, so we weren't allowed to go to any dances or proms or anything like that, because that was like lewd behavior, and they just assumed they called it sex with clothes on. So even in middle school, I couldn't go to any dances, and I was like, why? Like all my friends were like, why? What's going on? And that was like probably one of my first like biggest fights about this with my family, was just like, why can't I do this? And then there was sermons preached about it. Like whenever somebody in the church was like getting to that age, there was always a sermon preached about it, about how wrong it was. That was kind of like probably my first cue that I was just, I'm just like 16 years old. Like I don't have to make it like, it doesn't have to be like sexual. It doesn't have to be like dirty or sinful. That was probably one of my first cues, just that it wasn't normal. When I was in college, I was going to a local community college, and so I was with my family, and my first internship was at a domestic violence shelter. And because I always knew I wanted to help people, I got my first degree in social work, so that was kind of just like my segue into that. And I was learning all about like abuse and just kind of like what it is, how to identify it, those kind of things. And then I saw like the list of like the types of abuse. And I was familiar with like what I would say is like the main ones or like the most talked about ones, which is just like physical, sexual, emotional, those kind of things. But then I was reading through the list, and at the very bottom, it was like religious/spiritual abuse. The words just like stuck out to me. And so I read just like a few sentences about it, and then all of a sudden it just like felt like my world just like came crashing down around me, because I was like, that's what I'm in. I am in an abusive like situation. This is all I've ever known. My gut feeling was right. Just like when I always stormed out, like after an argument with my parents about something that I didn't agree with, like I was always like the troublesome child because I fought back. And then I was always the peacemaker. I'm the middle child. So I was trying to like go back and mend it after I would stir things up. That right there, just me reading about like, even just seeing that is a type of abuse was really like the moment when I was like, oh my gosh, okay, yeah, that sounds definitely like it applies to me, and I don't want this anymore. And I was like, and I know that in the future, like whenever I do have kids, I don't want that for them, like, because it's just like, it's something that so many people, if they're born into it, that's all they know. And then it passes down. They get married in the church, and then they have kids, and then it's just like a cycle. Like that's what happened in my family. So that was kind of like my cue to make a change. It's really hard to put into words like how much of a reality check. Basically, my whole reality was just like crumbled, like right there in the middle of that shelter, like in the middle of my shift. And then I just had like what felt like an existential crisis. And then luckily, I was pretty close with the caseworkers there and was able to talk with some of them. And they kind of walked me through and reminded me like, there are options. Like, you're not stuck in this. You are not tied to this. You always have a way out. And that really stuck with me. Just remembering, even when it does feel like this is all I have, because I knew that one of their practices is to shun. They call it disfellowshipping or like excommunicating, but they shun people and they make it public within the church. Because this happened to my cousins. Like, I wasn't allowed to see my cousins growing up or my aunt. So I knew that was going to happen to me. And when that happens, then not only can people who are still in the church, can they not eat with you? They can't talk to you, definitely can't support you through college anymore, which is what I was getting. Can't allow you to drive one of their cars, can't allow you to use one of their cell phones on their phone plan, like all of these things. It was just like, now I gotta figure out, what can I do? Like I was 20 and this was all I knew. And I was just like, okay, I guess I'll just start off with I kind of just like wrote down a list of everything I knew I was going to lose. And that was kind of like my first step, is just kind of planning, like, okay, what am I going to lose? What do I need to, what am I going to gain? Like, that was a big thing. What do I need to prepare? Who do I need to talk to about this? Yeah. And so those were basically just like my first steps, just from when I realized it was abuse, when I realized I had to do something to change it. And yeah, so that was like my first couple months were spent doing that, like figuring those things out.
What's super powerful to me is, putting myself in your shoes, is thinking about when you go through any type of hardship or transition, you need support. Mm-hmm. And you're basically taking all you've known as your support system, your people that have been in your life and you've had a very close relationship with, if you're going to church that much, and knowing like that's not going to be there. And not only is it not going to be there, they are shunning you. Mm-hmm. I can't even imagine how isolating that must have felt. And so what was your support system like outside of the church? You know, were your parents or siblings encouraging this? Like, were your friends there for you? Or, you know, what was that like?
Yeah. The support system is huge, especially when getting away from abuse. And so first off, I had been dating my partner for about 2 years at that point. And so he had come with me a couple times, just kind of like to appease my family at the church. That's a big thing that they're really worried about, is like getting with somebody in the church or converting somebody into it. So like he was familiar with like some of their crazies, because they don't always, they come off as very welcoming to kind of lure you in, and then they like got their hands on you. And yeah, so he was familiar with that. And so were his family. I had talked to them a little bit about just kind of like, this isn't right. I'm not comfortable staying in this. And they were like, yeah, of course, that sounds super like harmful. That sounds super abusive. So yeah, please, like whatever you need, let us help you. And so those were two really huge supporters for me. I tried to keep my family kind of more so in the dark about it, just because I didn't want there to be any future implications to come up for them not speaking up, for them not trying to do more. Because that's a big thing in the church, is like, if you know somebody is sinning and you don't stop them, then you're also sinning by not stopping them, like not doing everything you can in your power. So I just didn't want that for either my sisters or my parents. And so I kind of kept them out of it, but I knew that I was going to have to move out. That was my first thing, was just trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do? And my really, really wonderful friend, I talked to her about this. She said, I can call her out because she's amazing. My best friend, Tess, she took me in. Her and her husband, Billy, like cleared out their back room for me. They basically just said like, hey, you can have as much time as you need here. We just want you to be okay. We just want you to get better, and not have to worry about finding housing right now or anything like that. We just want you to be okay. So without them telling me that I would be able to come there, and like I didn't have like specific like time frame that I had to get out, like that took away so much stress. That took away so much like anxiety, just because like I didn't want to become homeless because of this. And I mean, even though I was kind of like couch surfing, or like in my case, it was kind of, looking back, kind of funny, because I'm like 6 feet tall, and I was like on like a little twin size air mattress, like in their back room. And I was like, wasn't the best, but I was safe and warm and fed. And that was really the priority. I just needed to get like my main needs met. So them and my boyfriend and his family, and one of my childhood best friends, she also grew up in the church, and she stopped going a while back, like a while before me. So like I reached out to her, and we're super close now, which is awesome, because we kind of lost touch for a little bit. But so she was very familiar with just how toxic that environment was. And she's like, yeah, like, please, you can come over anytime, like get out. And I was like, yes, thank you. So yes, leaning on support was probably, well, I don't want to say probably, it was absolutely what got me through that and therapy. I was like in my therapist's office every week, crying, panicky, anxiety attacks, especially like the 3 or 4 weeks leading up to it, because I planned it about 4 months in advance, and I set like a date, and I was like, okay, I'm going to be out by this day. I knew that it would be like the safest day for me to leave. And so, yeah, I was just I was comforted along the way with my support system, and that made a world of a difference for me.
I can't imagine having to leave your home, your people, your blood. I'm so thankful that you had these people in your life, and that you were working at this domestic abuse shelter at the time. These coworkers of yours, these light workers, like, yeah, those are like, Jesus is within them. That's what I keep thinking of, is when I think about God and Jesus and everyone's, whatever you believe, whether it's God or you're spiritual or the universe or you're not spiritual. My personal belief is that God is love and Jesus is love. And what I see is him within these light workers, your boyfriend, his family. And so, first of all, I'm bless them, but it's still got to be so hard. Walk us through the emotions you were feeling leading up to this date.
The main emotions were guilt, extreme anxiety, a little bit of anger that I had to do this, frustration, not only with myself, but like, I guess with everybody that brought me into that situation as well. But I think anxiety was the biggest one. Like that was by far the worst bout of anxiety, just like weeks at a time, where I was having a hard time eating. I was having the worst nightmares, which were always around like church, always around like them pulling me up in front of everybody and like shaming me, which is basically what they do. It was just so much anxiety that I almost just backed out just for the sake of easing the anxiety. A lot of worry that I was going to be damned to hell. Like that was what I was taught my whole life, is that if you, as soon as you stop going, like as soon as you sin and you don't apologize or like ask for forgiveness for it, then you are going to go to hell until you right things, until you ask for forgiveness. And so like, even though consciously I knew that like that was not how it works, in my subconscious, just in my really deep down, I was still really, really worried about that. And so I had so much worry around if something were to happen to me. Like they would always give examples during sermons, like you have to get baptized as soon as you think you might need it, because if you die in a bus accident on your way to go getting baptized, then that's not enough and you're going to go to hell and you should have done it sooner. And if you die before you ask for forgiveness, then you're going to go to hell. Like it's just like, it was so cut and dry, so much fear-based. Basically that's how they would keep people in line, is by using fear. And so that stuck with me because I had that instilled in me for 20 years, and that takes a lot of work to get past that. Even on the conscious surface, I am able to look at that and say, yeah, that's not correct. But yeah, the indoctrination, the brainwashing is just it goes a lot deeper than I ever would have guessed. And I'm a psych major. Like I know a lot about psychology and just especially about just how that impacts you. And it's like, until you live it, you really don't understand what being brainwashed is, or what being brainwashed does to you.
What I keep thinking about is, you mentioned this fear, right? Like I think it's scary enough as a kid to think of dying, but then to also think like the second you die, you're going to go straight to hell. Like what a scary thought for a little kid. I mean, really for anybody at any age. But you'd also mentioned like being brought up in front of the church and like them shaming you. And I am so curious, like what else did you go through, or what happened in this type of cult environment that you realized like this is off, or I'm feeling these really big feelings?
I was called out a lot, even if it was just like the preacher up in the pulpit and was, Kailey, like you're not paying attention, because I would get bored. We would hear the same things and like I would start doodling or like passing notes with a friend or something, but like the preacher was always just looking right down on me and would like call me out like that. There was a lot of generalized call outs. For instance, there was like a few old men in particular that would always make comments about how certain women were dressed, because that was a huge thing at the church, was modesty, or what they considered to be modest, which is basically not showing any skin. The fact that women were the ones to blame if men got lustful thoughts after them. We were pretty much chastised for wearing anything that showed any of like our like chest, anything that was tight on our body. Couldn't wear leggings, couldn't wear dresses or skirts over your knees or like shorter than your knees. There was so much like kind of call outs around that. Like one instance in particular that I'm remembering that I felt so horrible and angry about was one of the church members was actually coming out to my own house and working on a garage. He was a contractor and was building this big garage for my family. And I came home from school. I was in high school. So I was like 16. I came home from high school and I was wearing this like a sweatshirt and leggings. And he started talking about in front of the whole church and referenced me, like, not by name, but everybody knew he was doing work for my parents. And he was like, yeah, this girl that goes here, I watched her walk by me in leggings and I saw her pink panties through it. And like everybody was just like acting like shocked and like disgusted, not only at me, but just like the thought that a woman would wear something like that. Another old creepy guy was always, whenever he would serve communion, the next week, he would always go up there and talk about how he was so disappointed that that he was able to see down so many women's shirts while he was passing it around, and then would talk at the women, but then also their husbands, and be like, you need to do more to keep your wives in check. Like, you need to do more to make sure that doesn't happen. Because, like, if she's going to cause a man to stumble, like, that's on her. And that's also on you, because you're her husband and you're the head of the household. You need to be the one to keep that in check. So it was just like always so much like making everybody feel bad. A lot of it was around women. It was definitely a misogynistic church. And like they would kind of sometimes even make jokes and like scoff at the idea of like a woman doing anything more than just sitting silently throughout the whole service. So that was a huge thing that always made me feel totally just horrible at the end. Like I don't think I ever left one single service feeling uplifted or, excited to be a part of that. But it was more so like, you're lucky that you're here, because if you weren't, then you wouldn't be going to heaven. That was kind of like their way of like almost making you crave the community, whatever type of community they created. It was just like, you're lucky to be here. Now go bring all your friends, because they need to come here too. And if you don't, then you're responsible for them going to hell. So it was just like, it was so much like black and white. There's no gray area. Really, one of their big things is like, we speak where the Bible speaks. We're silent on what the Bible is silent on. So it was basically just like, they would always provide like book, chapter, verse for everything. If they wanted to try and like prove somebody wrong, then they would like literally spend hours looking through a Bible, and they would like cherry pick random verses and completely use them out of context, and then use that to try and make that person feel dumb. And they would always encourage you to ask questions, but as soon as you do, they would just throw a handful of Bible verses at you with like a rehearsed argument, because that was one of the things we were brainwashed with, was like how to argue with people on things that we didn't agree with. And so it was hard to even question anything, because you knew exactly what they were going to say to you. And then they would be like, why are you doubting this? You shouldn't be asking that kind of a question. Like, unless you wanted that information so you could talk to one of your friends about it. It was just very much like they would say, oh, all questions are welcome. And then as soon as you would ask a question, then it would just be like, not that one. Like, you should know, like, if you loved God enough, if you were a devout enough Christian, you would have already known the answer to that.
Gosh, it sounds like gaslighting. Just sounds toxic. Like, it is toxic. And it shows how strong fear is, like how powerful of emotion that is, that it can get you to stay in such a toxic place and not even to get you to realize the power that you have. Like those light workers, the social workers, or, your coworkers who helped you see, like, you always have a choice, and it's a hard choice. Mm-hmm. Oh my, I just want to acknowledge the strength in you right now.
Mm-hmm. And you were conditioned not to speak.
Right.
Because
or question.
Yeah. Like, women don't speak. And if you do speak, it's a dumb question. So how did you get to the point where you were like, I'm actually going to do something about this? I'm done feeling like this. Like, did something happen that was like the final straw? Or like, what got you to actually say no more?
Absolutely. There is one thing in particular. I finished my internship at the shelter, and I was also finishing my degree. So I decided that I was going to go on a cruise, because I love cruises. and celebrate. And so I was going to take two of my best friends and my boyfriend, because I mean, we've been together over 2 years, and it's not like I was just like, it was a fling and I was like, yeah, let's go hang out, like that kind of thing. And so I didn't think it was going to be a huge problem. And so I just kind of nonchalantly brought it up to my dad, and I was just like, yeah, hey, like this is happening. Just wanted to let you know I'm going to be gone from this date to this date, and here's who is coming. And I thought he would be, I guess, relieved that my boyfriend was coming, because he's a really big dude, like very strong and muscular, and could protect me in a whole foreign country. Like I thought that would make him feel better than me being with like two girls that are like smaller than me. And so my dad he freaked out and was like, absolutely not. Like, do you know like what that would be doing? Like, do you know how sinful that would be? And I was like, I hadn't thought about it, no. And so then what happened was he decided to do a 3-way phone call with the preacher, who is an elder at the church, and the other elder there, and basically put them all on speakerphone, and they all just berated me for having any desire to do that. Like, they told me that it was going to be, one, just sinful because I would be putting myself in like a temptation, or in like a setting that was tempting, but two, it was going to be sinful for me because I was going to be putting my boyfriend in a situation where he was no doubt going to lust after not only me, but my two best friends and all the other women on the cruise ship in bathing suits. So once again, like, not putting any responsibility on a man for controlling their thoughts, but it was all about, you know, this is going to be your fault because you're going to put him in this situation. You're going to make it difficult for him to have pure thoughts, and that's all going to be your fault. You know that men and women can't live together before they're married, so why would it be okay for you guys, the four of you guys, to share a cabin on a cruise ship, like, if you're not married? And I was like, it's just a vacation, like, and I don't know, it did not sit right with me. I felt like I almost couldn't even defend myself, because I was just like, not only had I been taught to not speak up for myself, to not question, to not fight back, but here was 3 men of power all coming at me at once. And I just sat there basically like dumbfounded, like, I don't even know how to fight this, because it was just so much nonsense. But you could tell that they believed every word of it. Like, yeah.
I have a question. So I'm curious about, because you have a degree at this point. So you're in your 20s, you're a full grown adult. So that, along with free will, like, at what point are you an adult and you can make your own decisions and acknowledge that we have free will? And
like, once you're married?
Yeah. Like, when does that come into the picture that you can do what you want and then you pay the price yourself without all of these opinions? Like, does that ever come into the picture?
So one thing that they're big about is like always answering. Women pretty much always have to answer to a man. In their ideal world, a woman will not move out from her parents' house until she is getting married, and then it's her husband's job to keep her in check. But as long as you're, single, especially if you're living under like your father's roof, then that's his say. And basically, I was given the ultimatum: if you do this, because my dad and the elders knew that I was capable of doing this, but it was, if you do this, you're going to lose everything. You're going to lose, every sort of support that you get. Is that worth it? Are you really going to give up your car? Are you going to give up where you're living right now? Are you going to give up your phone? Like,
so your dad agreed with what they were saying about, like, he would not support you anymore if you made this decision as well?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. That's how they keep you in check, especially parents, because he had his own kind of, responsibility in his eyes, because there's some Bible verse that they twist, and luckily I don't even remember it, but it's basically like, if you support somebody while they're in sin, then you're also in sin. So in my dad's eyes, he's like, I can't support you if you do this, because then I'm also sinning, and I'm not going to do that. And I'm not going to put my soul at risk just to, make you comfortable while you're sinning. And you're well aware of that. That was my thing, was like, if you do this, then, you're out. You have to do things on your own. And like, I had just graduated with my associate's degree. So I knew that I knew I was going to be getting my bachelor's. So like, it's not like I was ready to just like go out and adult fully. Like this was just like that I was trying to utilize my summer break, because I was going to be finishing up my bachelor's right after. And so that was kind of why I was still living there. But that also was just like, okay, yeah, clearly this isn't going to work. Clearly I do have to leave, because I can't just be controlled like this. I was starting to kind of feel my voice, like when I was, fighting back and arguing, like not necessarily when they were on the phone, because that was very overwhelming for me. But like afterwards, like after they hung up, I argued with my dad. I argued in my own head. I was just trying to figure out, okay, like, what can I do so that this doesn't happen again? So I immediately started to like look for a car like that I could call my own. So it wasn't something that could be like, okay, give me the keys, or I'm going to report the car stolen, or like, give me the keys because that's mine and you're disobeying me, so you can't drive that anymore. Like that had happened a couple times. And so I hated having that sense of like control over me, like naturally. So that was my first thing, was like, I decided, okay, I have to buy my own car. And then that was when I was also putting in the kind of plans to figure out when I was going to be able to move out, how I could move out, what all I had to do. So I started picking up a lot more hours at work, because the shelter that I had started my internship there, but they hired me. So I was working there a lot. I was also working at a nursing home, just picking up hours wherever I could, just so I could buy a car. And it was not nice. Definitely not safe, but it was mine and it couldn't be taken away. So that was really all that mattered. And that was like my first kind of key to freedom, because I was like, okay, I can stay in my car if I have to. Like I can drive to one of my friends, like, and I don't have somebody to answer to because of it. So that was the occurrence that I was like, yeah, I can't do this anymore. And then that was kind of like how I kind of started on that as well.
So did you go on the trip with your boyfriend and 2 friends?
No, at the time it was just my friends, because I was going to be leaving in like 3 weeks and I didn't have enough time to get everything set up. So I just, like, my boyfriend and I were going to be taking multiple vacations, like especially this summer we're going on a trip, and that'll be our first alone. But we've been on some other like trips with his family and just like with some friends and stuff. And so in my head I was like, I would do this like so hard right now, but I did not have the funds to be kicked out, as soon as I got back from the vacation. So it was put on hold. Just me and him going on a vacation, but I did still go. I just made it a girls' trip.
So because you did that, did your dad and the elders in the church, did they have any idea that you were about to leave come that 4-month date that you had picked? Or was everyone surprised?
Everyone was surprised except for my boyfriend and his family, and then my friend Tess and her husband Billy, because I had been moving out like boxes at a time, because my room was upstairs. My parents never go up there. So I had been moving out like a box or 2 at a time, like while they were gone, and would take them over to my friend's house. And I did that for like a couple months. And then on the day that I had chosen, July 1st, they were actually taking my little sister to a church camp. And so I knew that they were going to be gone for at least like 6 or like 8 hours, because it's like a long drive. So I used that day, like I said bye to them in the morning, like it was a regular day. And then I called up my boyfriend and I was like, hey, can you help me move out like my last few like big items. Yeah. And then I moved out while they were gone, and I waited 2 days before I contacted my parents. I called my mom first, and I was like, hey, I just need you to know, like, I'm totally okay. And I moved out. I couldn't be there anymore because like my dad and I had just gotten into a really big fight before too. Like the night before, I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I just wanted you to know. And she's like, okay, thank you, like, for telling me that you're okay. Cause like my mom and I, we are really close. And then I called my dad up, and I called him up and I said, hey, I'm not going to live in your house anymore. And then he was like, okay. And he said, where did you move? And I was like, I don't really want to talk about that. And he said, okay, where are you going to church? That was his first question. It wasn't like, are you okay? Like, what happened? Or like, who are you living with? Like, are you safe? But it was just, where are you going to church? And I was like, I'm not planning on it right now. And then that just like sent into like a whole spiral, like begging, pleading, crying, and then like telling me that like it's not worth my soul. He asked me if I was pregnant, and I was like, no, but like, I mean, that definitely would have been a reason I would have had to leave, because that was always like a huge, like, no, like if you get pregnant before you married, like the whole church will look down on you so hard. And so I was like, no, I'm not. But I mean, but I'm gone, and I'm not going to be coming back. And that whole call was like, my heart was beating so fast. Like that conversation was what I had so much anxiety about, not letting the church know, because I was like, you know what, screw them. I don't care about them, but I love my parents. And I pity, because my dad was born and raised in it. I know all of the indoctrination and the brainwashing that he's gone through, that he hasn't gotten around to thinking for himself on it. So I know, as twisted as it is, like, it's coming from a good place, that he does love me, but I was like, I can't do that, and I shouldn't have to do that anymore. So that was the argument the phone call that I was dreading the most, and it did go really poorly. Luckily, my friends who I was staying with, they kept sending me messages, like little gifts of like, it was really horrible, but like pictures of like Jesus like shaking his finger at me, like just basically just like, because they knew like how this church portrayed that. And so they just kind of like were trying to just like make the mood light, because I was crying, my dad was crying, like, and I called him on Facebook because I changed my whole number, I changed my whole phone plan, like all of this, just because I was like, I wanted a clean break from especially the church. If like there was going to be any harassment, I didn't want anybody to have my phone number, because there typically is plenty of harassment. Like, I got lots of Facebook messages, the ones that I had overlooked on blocking, because I anticipated that, so I blocked a bunch of them before. I was just really, really anxious the whole time. Keeping it secret was hard, especially from my sisters and my mom. I kept it secret from my dad because I didn't want that meltdown to happen in person. I needed to do it where I knew that I had the most control, so where I could just hang up if I needed to, because there's a lot of emotion in that, especially like, because in his eyes, like, he's responsible for my soul, his baby girl, like, going to heaven, and like the fact that he couldn't stop that, I knew it would crush him, and it did. And I knew that in person I would have caved. So I had to set those boundaries for myself, had to set a lot of boundaries during that conversation, after the conversation. And yeah, I basically just was like, if you're going to continue to tell me that I'm going to go to hell, like every time you see me, then I'm not going to come around anymore. And you're not going to see me anymore. And this was a big twist, because I went out of my way to make sure that in my dad's eyes, that the church didn't have a right to shun me, because they can do that if you are still part of the church. So what I did a lot of research. Like, there's actually multiple support groups out there for people who have left this church. It's called the Church of Christ. And I joined a couple different support groups and was just like trying to see like how you could go about that to where your family didn't have to shun you. So basically what I did was I sent in my own like message to the preacher, the elders, that I wasn't going to be coming there anymore. And this was before they had any idea. So I was the one to cut the ties. And then, well, they were petty, so they still sent me a letter of resignation, or of shunning, excommunicating, disfellowshipping, whatever you want to call it, but it's shunning. And they still decided to do it anyways. But I knew that at least in my dad's eyes, at least in my parents' eyes, that the church was not in the right there. So I wanted to be able to give my family a loophole so they could still talk to me and basically not cause more problems for my family in case they did want to stay in touch with me, because I didn't want them to feel like, well, their soul was at risk for talking to their daughter. So that was kind of like a lot of work that I had to do to get to that point. But yeah, I kind of went out of my way to be the one to tell people, not for them to find out, because I wanted to have control over that, because my whole life I had control over nothing. So that was like the one big thing that I could do, that I could decide on when they found out, how they found out, like, you know, if they got any reasons, or if I was just going to say, you know what, I'm done. Like, I'm not coming and I don't wish to speak about this. Like, and then I just like stopped responding as soon as they started replying back to me. And then I was like, you know, that's enough. Like, you don't need any more details.
Mm-hmm. I think it's beautiful that you did it out of an act of love for your parents when you didn't need to. That says so much about you. And how long ago was that from today?
I left July 1st of 2019. So it'll be 3 years this July. I got my shunning letter in October, beginning of October, because I guess they took a while to type it up, but that was when I got it, and they read it out loud. That's their thing. They send you a letter telling you that they're going to shun you, and then they read it out loud to the entire congregation, like up front. And it was really horrible because my dad has been a part of that his whole life. He was born into the church at that church, and they really did my family dirty, because they just, instead of giving them a heads up, like, hey, we're going to have a really difficult like topic of conversation tonight at church, they completely blindsided them. Like I said, my dad didn't think that was even going to happen to me because of the steps I took. And then all of a sudden they're up in front of the whole church, which was like 100 something people, like reading about how I am going to be marked as an unfaithful Christian, marked as a sinner, why I am, you know, just basically a lost cause now, and that nobody is going to be allowed to talk to me or speak to me or eat with me or anything like that anymore. And so my dad was in the crowd crying. Like, my mom walked out because she was just like, what the heck is this? Like, why? And then as my dad was just like breaking down, because this was his worst nightmare, they called him up to the front and was like, hey, you need to pray for your daughter in front of everybody. And so my dad just had to like try to like suck it up and try to you know, like perform pretty much in front of everybody. Like, and so that was really traumatic, not only for him but for my family. And then I am just a super empathetic person, so I felt horrible that he had to go through that. And so that caused me a lot of nightmares, a lot of grieving and sadness and anxiety over that too. But yeah, that was kind of how that went.
I think taking a step back, listening to this story, and thinking about the measures you had to go through just to stop going to a building is unbelievable. And if you're trying to figure out if it's abuse or not, like just to think of the plan and the research you had to do and the blocking and changing your number and getting a car and thinking about having to live in it, like I can't even imagine what this experience was like. And I'm so happy you're walking us through to get that picture of all the different things that you had to do and think about and troubleshoot, and the therapy you've probably had to do up to this point. And I just keep thinking of like this control and this shaming, like public shaming. Like, who does that? Who does that? I don't think Jesus would do that. Actually, no, Jesus wouldn't do that. And that's my belief, okay? And I am entitled to feel the way I feel. And I'm so happy that you did that you had the balls. I don't even want to use balls because they had so much power over women. I want to use a different word. But the courage.
Yes.
Like, you are such a badass. And I just love that you listened to that voice finally after all of those years.
And despite all of the reasons not to, you still chose you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah, it was hard because, everything I had ever been taught was, to quiet that voice, to ignore that, and so actually being able to empower myself enough to listen to it was just groundbreaking for me, groundbreaking for, other people at that church that I know there are quite a few that have left since I have. And it's just like, there's hope. there is an option. There's always an option. Listen to that still small voice in your head. Like, if it doesn't feel right, it's not right. And you have to trust yourself. And it's hard when there's that gaslighting, that brainwashing, just because it's like, it teaches you to doubt yourself, to question, to feel shameful for even questioning, to feel shameful for that doesn't really sit right with me. And then you're bombarded by all these people telling you why you're wrong and why it should sit right with you. And here's a handful of verses taken out of context. And now you can go think about what you've done. Why did you have to stir that up? Why did you have to speak out about that? And so actually being able to, listen to that voice in my gut that said hey, we do have to get out. I think I just needed that confirmation, that kind of even education around it, that, this wasn't right. And my gut was right all along. And so I feel like that aspect was huge, is just being able to have the awareness or the education around, that was abuse, and that I had every right to leave because I questioned that for so long. And sometimes I'm still working on this in therapy. Sometimes I'll wake up from a really bad dream about this church, and then I'll start questioning everything. And I'm just like, I know that's not true, but that's a lot of deep subconscious work I got to start doing, or I've been doing, but got to keep working on, because it's just it's going to be a lifelong journey. But I'm glad I started when I did, because that puts me that many steps ahead than I would be if I just started today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a beautiful way to look at it. And, you're a coach, we're coaches, and as coaches, we know that beliefs are the most powerful indicator of why we do the things we do. And you have these beliefs that are conditioned into you. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. It does take work, and it even takes work to see that these beliefs that have been instilled in you and conditioned in you aren't true. I'm curious, for someone listening who, whether it be religious abuse or some sort of abuse, if you could say something to them, what would you say?
I think I've probably said this a couple times, but if it doesn't feel good, if it makes you feel icky, if it makes you just feel shameful, or almost like you feel crazy, dig into that. Why is that? Look into is this somebody doing this to me? Am I doing it to myself? Am I trying to look away, or like, am I making excuses for somebody or something? Like, that's a really big one. Like, and I've honestly heard multiple people, like, and I've called out a couple people that I've coached, a couple friends of mine, like, where they say something that just kind of is like rings the alarm in my head. And I'm like, hey, can we step back and elaborate on that a little bit? Like, what did you mean by that? Like, it's just like, this one guy was, talking to me about like how things with his wife have gotten like really, really difficult. And he said, yeah, a couple of times it's actually gotten so bad that I've had to call the police. And he just kind of said it like nonchalantly. And I was like, okay, can we step back and like look at that? And then the remainder of our call, which actually ended up going quite a bit over the appointment time, but it needed it, but was him explaining to me everything that she has done, like, that makes him uncomfortable, that makes him feel bad. And then me also kind of educating him around like, hey, yeah, that is still absolutely abuse. It doesn't matter that she's smaller than you. It doesn't matter that she's not leaving bruises. It doesn't matter that she doesn't always hit you. It's sometimes words. It's sometimes her taking away the money from you. Basically, at the end of the call, he was crying and thanking me for validating what he was going through and not being judgmental, not having any sort of like, I don't know, judgment in my voice, like, that's happening and you're allowing it. Like, because that's a lot of times why men will fear coming forward about that, because it's like, oh, you need to keep your woman in check, and which is a whole other like horrible thing to think. But that was just like one example. Another one is a woman's son, adult son, is abusing her, and I helped her identify that. And another woman, her husband was verbally abusing her, and she was so used to it. Because oftentimes it rarely ever starts out like first date that they're gonna abuse or with the church. The first time you go in, they swarm you with love. It is like, they're going to draw you in, make you want to stay, give you just enough good feelings to be able to think back on when you want to leave. And so that's a very common theme, is like, they'll give you just enough. Or sometimes it's they love bomb you, and then they take it away like slowly and then all at once. And then that's kind of like, there's like a kind of a basic cycle with abuse. It's just like, okay, there's like the big event, the fight, the outlash, and then there's the honeymoon phase and the remorse that like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, like I can never do that again. And then there's the tension building where the victim is just like kind of walking on eggshells, and like they can tell like their abuser is just kind of like, like it's getting back to that point, but not yet. So it's like, am I imagining this? Like, they did say they would never do it again. And then it comes back to full circle. Then there's another event. And this is just like it's a recurring theme in every type of abuse. And it's hard, and it can be very emotionally taxing, not only to go through it, but to empathize with somebody who is going through it, to be the only one that recognizes it. And I guess that's one big thing that was a big part of my training at the shelter, was just that you can't make somebody leave a situation. You cannot make somebody decide that enough is enough. They have to get to that point on their own. But what you can do is support them, provide non-judgmental education. You can, be somebody that can provide them with any resources. If you're comfortable, be a resource, a source of support yourself. And then it's up to them. The ball's in their court. It's just up to you to make sure that they know that they have options.
I love that you just put so many words on the feelings that can happen, the actions that can happen, because like you said, sometimes you're in the cycle that you're born into it, whether it's physical or emotional, verbal abuse. I mean, if it's all you've ever known, it might not feel like abuse to you. It actually feels kind of comforting because it's all you've ever heard or felt or seen with your siblings, or, when you're in that cycle, you don't know any better, honestly. Mm-hmm. And so I love that you talked about this, because we haven't really touched on this on Ivy Unleashed. And I think it's so important that, one person could be listening to your story or hear about this cycle of abuse and be like, oh, wait, that happens to me, or that used to happen to me.
Or I know someone who's going through this, yes, and I don't really know what to say. Is it my place? Mm-hmm. Re-listen to what Kailey just said. If you have someone in your life that needs your support, because it's a perfect way of how to be supportive without being judgmental, knowing that it is their choice if they leave, but that doesn't mean that you can't still have a part in their life supporting them.
Yeah. And exactly what you had in your life, Kailey, is you had people that were there. You knew they were there, whether they, they didn't make you leave. They didn't tell you you had to make that choice. You had to, I don't want to say pull the trigger, but they let you do that, and they were there, and sending you memes in the meantime to make you laugh, but I think there's something about, you can't make them leave, but you can tell them you're there. You can check in and be like, hey, I'm here. I'll drop anything. I've got a bed for you. I'll pick you up, whatever it is, because sometimes you just need to know it's still there, or it's available if you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something that I think I'm so thankful for, and also something that I always bring up if I am talking to somebody going through abuse. If I'm talking to somebody who thinks they know somebody who might be going through abuse, and just really emphasize the support. Seek out support. It's okay to ask for help. It's definitely good to ask for help. Be willing to help others. Like you mentioned, be willing to go pick somebody up, or, if somebody comes to you and hey, I don't really know how to talk about this, but if for some reason I need to get away for a night, can I crash at your place? Say yes if you're okay, if you're able to, because that could mean the difference between life and death for some people. That can mean the difference for, extreme mental health, crises, that can just butterfly effect that just being able to support somebody, letting them know that you can support them. Or if you're in that situation, if you, kind of gather up the courage just to ask, hey, would it be okay if I needed to crash at your place? Just having that, building that support system can really make or break the process of leaving.
I'm so glad you're touching on the support system. And I keep thinking about your parents, and just developmentally, we're just attached to our parents, whether we want to be or not. And so I'm curious now, it's been a couple years, and there's traumatic event happened to your dad in the church. And I'm curious, the last few years, what's happened, and where are you at now with your relationship with your family?
Yeah. So the night that they read out loud that letter, my dad said to them, we are going to attend another church. It's another Church of Christ, but another one in another town, until things cool down, because this really just didn't sit right with me, how this was carried out. And they took the liberty there that after a week and a half, for them to announce to the entire congregation that my family had decided to leave the church because of me. So my parents were just okay, I guess we're just going to go to this other church instead, which is farther away and everything, but they're we're not going to go back. And so that was I think that my dad that was kind of a sign of solidarity on his side. They didn't do it the right way. So I think he felt that was, kind of his way of supporting me by not going back. They're still at the same type of church, same doctrines, those kind of things. This one is a little less aggressive with everything, which I like, but it's still got a lot of the same problems. But So that was one thing that happened. I had to set a lot, and I mean a lot of boundaries for whenever I would come home to see my family, because after I moved out, I was gone. I didn't see my family face to face until my birthday, which was at the end of that month, at the end of July. I was going out of my comfort zone to say hi to them, and they gave me a card that basically just said, like, we love you, we're really worried about your soul, like, please think about this, like, kind of like the love and then the kind of guilting all at once. And so that was a really rough conversation, and it was like all around dinner at like an Olive Garden. So it was just like I couldn't like cause a scene or like, I don't know. So I just kind of had to sit through it. And then after that happened, I was just like, you know what, you guys, like, you can't have it both ways. You can't have me in your life and continue to, talk to me like that. Like, I'm my own person. I'm going to do what I want. And like, I feel like I've made that pretty clear, but like, you guys are not going to change my mind anymore. Like, I believe what I believe. I am comfortable with where I'm at, and that's that. And so that kind of stuck in place for a couple months. They didn't know where I lived for quite a while. And I actually ended up moving like across the state because I didn't want to run into anybody from church in town, because that's a really, really uncomfortable situation where they'll only speak to you if they're like shaming you into coming back to church. And I didn't want that. They're also known for like knocking on your door, like giving you a bunch of phone calls, like a bunch of emails, Facebook messages. Like, I got those, and I was like, I just don't want to see them in person. So I moved like 3 hours away, and so I wouldn't have to deal with that. But so whenever I would come back for like a holiday just to like see my family, that topic always came up. Like, we're really worried about your soul. Like, you really need to think about this. Like, don't be selfish. Like, don't be naive. We taught you better than this, that kind of stuff. And I think it was after like 6 months of that, I had enough. And I was just like, you know what? Like, I thought I made myself clear, but if you continue to speak to me like this, then I will not be coming around anymore. And I have to look out for myself. And I love you guys, but I'm not going to put myself in this situation anymore where I constantly leave feeling emotionally, mentally drained, and re-triggering all that guilt and shame, and making me question myself, my own sanity. Like, it was just like, those were such loaded questions that I knew had so much weight behind them. So I was just like, these cannot happen anymore, or I will not be back. And that finally was the conversation that made it clear to them. It was mostly my father who was the one, because he had been, told so many times, like, it's his role as the head of the house, the head of the family, to keep me in check. So like, my mom was always just kind of like sitting by the sidelines. Like, she wasn't born into it, she married into it. So like, it wasn't as deeply ingrained in her. So that was like, those boundaries were just really huge. And like, right now we're actually pretty good. Like, they're super proud of me for like finishing college. Like, I was really worried they weren't going to come to my graduation, just because like I was expecting that I was going to be like shunned and completely cut out. But so like, they were supportive in that. Came to my graduation. They celebrated with me when I got offered my first job out of college. They'll come and visit me now, which they didn't used to, really, because I lived with my boyfriend and we're not married. And but now they'll actually come and like hang out and like just be here with me and not have those uncomfortable conversations. So like, things have gotten a lot better. It's still really tough, and I know that if I hadn't set those boundaries, that we wouldn't be where we are today, because it wasn't clear. It wasn't gonna happen naturally without me having to be forceful on that. But I am glad I did that. So I'm very, very, I feel lucky that I got to, I didn't lose anybody important in the process. All the people at the church that shunned me, like, I can't say I care about them, especially about their opinions of me, because like you cannot take things personally, because anything that anybody does or says is just a projection of their own internal reality. And so the things that they want to say about me, like, you know, they want to shake their head and be like, wow, she has so much potential, like all that stuff. Like they saw me as like somebody that was going to have like marry somebody in the church and have a bunch of babies and, you know, keep the church alive. But that's clearly not where my path took me. And so just like I had to set those boundaries for myself too, that like their opinions of me are irrelevant. Do I even want them to like me? No, not really. That's a big thing, because in that church, especially as a woman in there, you are basically like formed into a people pleaser, a serial apologist. Basically, you cower at any assertive male around you. It's just like, okay, yeah, you're right. Like I can't fight back. So
I would never survive there. I'd be kicked out. I won't be able to live like that.
I am so proud of you.
Yes.
For sticking up for yourself, setting those boundaries with your parents, continuing to do this work, and so grateful that you're sharing your message, what you're learning, what you have learned with yourself and your experience to help the people that you coach, and now to share your message on Ivy Unleashed, the people listening. I'm curious what you're currently working on. You'd mentioned therapy, and we know you're in therapy, but within your own development and growth, what are you currently working on?
Yeah, so I love that you asked that, because I am a huge fan of just, you know, journaling. I write a lot, especially around these topics. I found a really wonderful book by Louise Hay. I have it right here. It is amazing. It's You Can Heal Your Own Life. And this is like gold for me right now. It's just so many deep, impactful questions. That's like a journal. The companion book is a journal, and I've been working through that. I have open and honest conversations with my friends, my partner, my sisters. Well, I also get energy healing work, which I am a huge fan of, which in that we actually uncovered that my throat chakra has been compromised, to say the least. And basically we just kind of dug into that, and it was like, probably because your voice was squished your whole life. You weren't allowed to speak up for yourself or to question or have really any of that just individuality. It was like you had to like fit into their cookie cutter like mold, or you were just, they didn't care about you. As long as you didn't serve them anymore, then you were like pretty much dead to them. So yeah, those, and really just giving myself space to not only feel the feelings, but identify them, dig into why it's bothering me. Like sometimes little things will, like, I guess for lack of better words, like trigger like that emotion where I would just be really feeling anxious like this. Little things, even I was walking through Hobby Lobby, and they were like, they play like they're like instrumental music, like, and it was like a hymn that I sang so much like growing up, and that just like, I thought I was about to just like have to run out of the store, because I was like, it just hit me so hard, and I don't even like, if I hadn't given myself the space to think through that, then I would have just been like, okay, I can't go to Hobby Lobby anymore. But but instead I'm like, okay, yeah, it was the song that got me. And then I was able to think about, like how the brain associates so many different things with trauma, like scents. Like if I were to smell like something that reminded me of the dusty like pews in there, that would probably get me very anxious or just not in a good mood. If I hear something, if I taste like the communion. Like we would just have Welch's grape juice because they were like very against any alcohol. So like Welch's grape juice, like I can't drink that because I just associate that with church. So it's just like learning yourself, really taking the time to understand why certain things impact you, and also validating that, reminding yourself that it's okay is really, really a big part of this for me. And also just, once again, that support system is where it really comes into play. Like the amount of deep conversations I've had with my partner about this, because like he knows probably, like he kind of knows surface level just about like the church, like just from what he saw, but everything that I've told him, like it continues to shock him. Sharing my story, like when I first got the letter sent to me I shared it on Twitter just because I was like, hey, this is what it looks like to leave a cult. And it kind of like, it got pretty big. Like I don't know, I like checked the numbers on it like a little while ago, and it was, I think, like close to 1 million people saw it. And I had so many people reaching out to me just saying like, oh my gosh, like, is this the Church of Christ? Like this has happened to me, or like this happened to my best friend, or like my ex used to go to this church and I went a couple times. Like, I'm so glad I didn't go. Like they always gave me weird vibes. And like, that was huge for me, because like that right there helped me so much to get through the gaslighting that was being directed my way, like from the church, like from everybody. And I was just like, okay, yeah, I'm not imagining this. Like, this is crazy. And a lot of other people have experienced this crazy. So like those support groups for people who've left it. Those people that reached out to me on Twitter, on Reddit, even like, cause I shared it in one of the support groups on there. It was just like being able to talk about it was really important for me, to not only acknowledge the feelings, but to like let them pass through me rather than harboring them and like holding them in. Because that's like one of the worst things you can do for yourself, like energetically, is by not letting emotions and that negative energy just to flow through.
Thank you for being so vulnerable, for sharing your story. And I hope you know and feel that by saving your life, you're giving others permission and the courage and the strength to save their own. So we cannot begin to understand the level of pain and what you go through, but it means the world to us that you trusted us to share your story with us.
And I keep thinking too, how the support that you needed growing up during these hard moments as a kid and being shamed, that now you're becoming the support for others that are missing that. You know, somehow your Twitter posts could have gotten to someone. Hopefully this message here on Ivy Unleashed gets to someone that is like, whoa, there's a different way. There's a different way to believe. There's a different way to have faith in God, or whatever it is, in my own way, with my own free will, without feeling so scared and so shamed. And so, yes, I just want to reemphasize that we are so grateful how brave you are to share this and to keep sharing it. And we want to hear more from you. So we would love now if you could share your 3 gold stars with us too.
Yeah, absolutely. So for my 3 gold stars, first is trust your gut. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. I say this to so many people all the time. Number 2, don't take anything personally. What others do and say is never truly about you. It's literally always about them, how they're responding, how they're reacting, how they're just seeing things, because it's their own version of reality. And 3 is just always be kind and non-judgmental to others, because you literally never know what others are going through. And yeah, that's just really important, because unless I spoke out about this, then nobody would have ever known, and nobody would know that I'm going through this on my own. And that's the kind of mindset I treat every single person that I speak to, I coach, that I just am friends with. Like, we'll never know everything about somebody else.
Yeah. And I hope you know you are not alone. I know you feel that from your support, but we want to echo that too, that we're family now and we're always here.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're so welcome. And now we have Unleashing Ivy, and these are our 3 rapid fire questions that are surprise. Are you ready, Kailey?
Yes.
Okay. My question is, right now in your world, what are your favorite self-care activities?
Journaling, breathing exercises, because that helps kind of counteract that fight or flight mode that you get in when you're stressed or anxious. I know you guys have talked about breath work on your show a little bit before. So yes, breath work, hot baths with like just smell good things. Like, I don't know what it is, but after a particularly difficult phone call, whether it be a coaching call where I'm talking to somebody about domestic violence, or if I am just having a rough day, a hot bath is always a cure-all for me, at least in the moment. I feel so much better every day when I make sure that I drink my gallon of water. It literally just being hydrated can make a huge difference for me, not only mentally, but physically. Like, I'm just able to think better. And I mean, that makes sense because our brains are mostly water. But so yeah, just drinking water is like one of my favorite, easiest forms of self-care. Snuggling my kitten, which I fostered and then decided to adopt, and I love her with my whole heart. And yeah, energy work that I mentioned, that's a really big one for me. And self-help books. I just love learning about, how I can improve, how I can help others improve. And they always just give me a really big kind of like insight into like, there's always room for growth, and you always have options no matter what. It's never an either or situation. There's always more than one option.
Oh, I love that. It's never an either or.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful.
All right. My question has to do with your faith. I can only imagine what this experience has done and how it has tainted your view of God, or, in general, your faith. So my question is, how has your faith changed, and kind of where are you at now with that?
Yeah. So for a hot couple months, I would say, when I left, I was kind of in that murky spot between like agnosticism and atheism. Like, I never was fully on board with just thinking that there's nothing, but so I kind of was more comfortable with just thinking, okay, yeah, like there's probably something, but I don't know what it is, and I don't know if I ever will know, but I do know that it's not what I was raised on. And over the past like year and a half, I have done a lot of just like soul searching, meditation, just digging into just kind of like the realm of like spirituality, which I know is kind of a broad term, but I'm very comfortably sitting in the space that, there is a source of power. People have different names for it. There's God, there's creator, there's Mother Nature, sometimes people call it. There's a lot of different names for it, but all I know is that I can feel it when I step outside barefoot and I feel the earth beneath my feet. And when I'm able to give myself love and appreciation, when I'm able to just be myself unapologetically, I'm just able to know that, there's something out there. There's a source of power that supported me through this, that gave me I think those gut feelings that was like, hey, like kind of nudge in the right direction. This isn't right. This isn't what it's supposed to be about. And so I don't have a specific identification other than just like, I'm just spiritual and just trying to connect with whatever's out there. I'm very open to learning about that. And that's definitely a journey that I am still towards the beginning on. It just took a long time for me to be able to kind of get over that hump of kind of dislike or disdain for like religion as a whole. But I know that just that small sect that I was born into is not at all, it can't speak for the whole. And so, yeah, that's where I just have to separate that.
Yeah. Sounds like coming back to your body and what feels good to you and being open and inviting that, because growing up in the church you were in, you were shamed and it was fear and it was all of these negative feelings. And that was your representation of faith. And so now it's finding your own faith that feels good to you and to you. So I think that's beautiful. And my last question is, what is one thing you wish you would have known sooner?
One thing I wish I would have known sooner is, I think I've said this a couple times, but that I always have a choice. You always have a choice. You are never truly trapped or stuck in your situation. And you do have the power to speak up for yourself, to seek and accept help. And I was never truly stuck, at least once I was like able to speak for myself. I would just wish I could go back and tell younger me that, you know, this isn't what my life has to be, and I can make my life my own. And that's what I'm doing now. And it feels really, really damn good.
Hell yeah. I know Andrew already said it, but you are a badass.
Thank you.
And you will continue to do amazing things in this world. No doubt about it.
Yes. And I just want the listeners to hear that if you're in any type of situation where you are in need of support, you can always reach out to Brooke and I. You can send us a message. We're also going to put all types of resources on our blog, hotlines, websites to go to in order to get the help that you need. It's out there, and we're here too.
And that's goldivyhealthco.com/blog, or just at goldivyhealthco on any social channels. Please do not hesitate to reach out.
Yes. And lastly here, we always like to leave our listeners with a piece of gold. So Kailey, would you please share yours?
Yes. Mine is from the one and only Bob Marley. You never know how strong you are until being strong is your only choice.
This is Gold Ivy signing off.
Listen to your truth and go chase your gold.